In this How I Lead interview, we're headed to Michigan to talk with Adam Broderick. And you're going to love this. Okay. Send this to every Elders Quorum president you know. So many nuggets here. We begin our conversation with just Adam unpacks this really interesting framing of the type of man who comes to Elders Quorum and the way they think and the way they approach the lesson and the way they consume the lesson and digest the lesson. And to me, I found it really helpful to think, wow, and how can we be mindful of these different types of men that come to Elders Quorum to give them a more positive experience? And then Adam has such a wonderful approach with all things, connection, building connection within the quorum, unity within the quorum, activities outside the quorum, and really stimulating this friendship to the point that, many who are in his group are just really benefiting from that experience. So I love these kind of How I Lead interviews that really give practical tools and approaches and things that really anybody can do and consider in their leadership. So send it to that Elders Quorum president, or Release Society president. Really any leader is going to benefit from this. So here we go. All right, we're headed to Michigan to talk with Adam Broderick. How are you, Adam?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good. Now tell people, you can even show your hand. Tell us where you are in Michigan. That's what they do there, right?
Yeah, that's the little thing. Like right here.
Right there.
So right central Michigan, a couple hours north of Detroit, kind of out in the middle of cornfields, but it's a nice area.
Yeah. And what's your closest temple? How long does it take?
Detroit, hour and 45.
Cool.
If you're speeding, an hour and a half. I've never done that though. Never.
Oh, I'm sure. And any plans, or is there any obvious location if President Nelson announced another temple or near you?
So there's the temple going in Grand Rapids. That is also 2 hours away. People have talked about here in Midland, we've got the perfect spot for it. So if anyone's listening who can make these decisions, like right next to our stake center, there's definitely a place that you could put a temple. So
all right,
just saying.
We'll all be listening a little closer in the next general conference. So, and we'll cheer for you if it happens. So very cool. And what do you do there in Michigan?
So I work in the building products or building manufacturing industry. I make things to weatherproof, air insulate, waterproof houses. Tyvek is a product name you may have heard. It's the white paper that goes on side of houses and keeps them dry and airtight. Styrofoam, another product you've probably heard of. The blue boards that go on the outside of homes to keep them warm. So that kind of stuff.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's awesome. One of those many products someone's got to do, but we just take for granted, right? So that's awesome. Now you've currently been serving as Elders Quorum president for a few years. Is there any story behind being called as Elders Quorum president?
Sure. So I've been serving for just over 3 years. And by the time this podcast comes out, I will probably be in a different calling. Meet with my stake president later this week. And so this is kind of wrapping up for me. So it's been a good experience to think back. Started in a time when we're sort of coming out of COVID. So there'd been sort of the way that we did things in COVID. And it was a good time to transition to become Elders Quorum president and start to think about things to say, okay, we're not COVID anymore. What do we need to do differently? How do we need to approach this and kind of not go back to the way we were before COVID, but sort of move forward in a really productive and positive way from the sort of lockdown, barely functioning organization that existed before that.
Yeah. Did you feel like it was a tough go at just getting people reintegrated into the typical schedule and coming to church and core meeting every other week? And
sure. Just getting back, no, that wasn't hard. But there was just not a lot happening. Very little energy in the quorum, very little connectivity, no real activities happening. So just kind of, it felt very static. Dead probably isn't the right word. That's probably too strong. But yeah, just not a lot of energy. And so as we came in, and I gathered a great group of guys in the Elders Quorum presidency, and we're like, okay, like, how do we restart this? How do we reinvigorate and create connection, create value, create an experience where people really want to come back and experience being part of that community?
Yeah, that's awesome. And anything like as far as demographics or how your word's laid out that would be helpful to just understand the context of where you're leading?
Sure. Uh, it's a centralized kind of core in the city with most of the people in our quorum, and then that spreads out to upwards of say 45 minutes away to sort of the
Hmm.
farthest reaches of the unit. Most people live in sort of the core within 10 minutes of church. Um, Broad range. Many people are professionals working at Dow Chemical, DuPont Chemical, or some of the subsidiaries that are based here. Um, but in terms of age, we range from just sent a young man on a mission, or is just leaving on right now, up
Hmm.
through 90 years old and everywhere in between.
Yeah. And how many typically show up in a core meeting?
It's typically 15 to 20
Okay.
is our average size.
And where do you meet in the church?
That's a good question, and it's interesting. We uh, It has not been ideal. We've bounced back and forth between the sacrament meeting choir seats and the high council room,
Hmm.
um, kind of based on who's there and whatnot. Having a more stable place to meet probably would be helpful. And I think sometimes the guys are like, "Okay, where are we meeting today?" But it
Yeah.
mixes things up. The different places have different pluses and minuses.
Yeah. Anything as far as in the beginning of your this experience, like being called and just you mentioned COVID and just sort of the awkwardness that was there, but anything else as far as that the processes you went through, things you tried that didn't work or worked, or how did you get
Sure.
started in the calling?
Yeah. No. And I think my experience has really been like an evolution over the 3 years. I've learned a ton through the process, and I really appreciate that I've had this opportunity to serve in the calling and see change happen. So, if nothing else, I don't think anything I'm going to say today is like otherworldly or truly revolutionary, but it has been evolutionary over time, kind of slowly going through. So, just to kind of start,
Yeah.
elders quorum when we came in was defined as, we walk into a room, say a prayer, do some announcements, do a lesson, say a prayer, and leave, right? And
Hmm.
and that was really all of elders quorum. There was ministering, but it had kind of fallen apart. Assignments were lots of dangling ends, loose, incomplete companionships, and really hadn't been updated for some time with the move-ins and move-outs and whatnot. So, kind of the first thing we did when we moved in is, okay, let's get a functional ministering assignment sheet list. So and that was actually a really cool experience. What we did is for our first ministering interview, rather than go in and just say, "Hey, how are your families doing?" We basically said, "Is ministering working for you? Do you like your companion? Is that working for you? How about your families? You know, are you connected to your families? Do you like them? Would you not care if you switched? Are there actually some interactions that aren't working? Like, yeah, let's switch it. Let's try something new." And we did that with everyone and just kind of said, "Where are you at? How is this working?" And and from that, some people said, "Yes, I really want to stay with the families I've got. The companionship, it's great." Others were like, "Yeah, things aren't going great. A reset would be helpful." And
Hmm.
taking all that together, I think we got to a really good kind of starting point for ministry. So that was like job one, to get that started. Now we're gonna, I think, come around to this in the conversation. I'm not sure we've made a ton of progress with the quality of ministering. Now I'll talk about as a presidency what we've done to do our best, right?
Yeah.
But so that was job one, and then job two was to start to build. And I'm going to say unity, but that's an abstract word. I think connection and just knowing each other is really what we wanted to try and accomplish. How do we get people to just know each other better? And, and I think that's super important. And it required us to take time away from the lesson to do so, which was a little scary because you go to the handbook and the handbook says prayer, counsel, meaningful gospel instruction, and a prayer. Right. That's the outline for a core meeting in the handbook right
Yeah.
now. Um, but what I realized, I think as a presidency, we realized is that meaningful gospel instruction was not really happening. And I've kind of emphasized that meaningful. What makes it meaningful? It's that we're having conversations that matter, like that really. And maybe a way to think about this is the conversations up to that point were really focused on sort of an ideal state where you could pick a topic, and I'm going to use journal writing throughout because that's like my quintessential lesson. And there's someone out there who's like, but I'm way into journal writing. I'm not meaning to offend you. Like, journal writing is great, but you get into a lesson, you're like, journal writing is awesome. You should be doing it every week. Here are the blessings that you get from it. Here's this like idealized state of journal writing. Go, right? Go off and do something with that. And as I talked to people in the quorum and thought about myself and my own experience with those types of lessons, I think there's sort of three different places that you can go with a lesson like that. Either one, you're self-motivated, you're growth-driven, you're like, I'm all into this is great. And inside your own head, you're like processing journaling and you're thinking about, opportunities for you to grow and like digesting it all inside your own brain, right? There are some people who are going to be like that, and they can you just give them a topic, and in their own they're just going to run with it.
Yeah.
But I think that's just a few of us, and to be honest, it's probably more like an elders quorum president, a high counselor, like those people that are leadership, they're growth oriented. So yeah, they're going to come out of those lessons, and they're like, I am so psyched to like go write in my journal today. Okay.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of person one. Person two is sitting there thinking, there's nothing new. I've had 7 lessons on journals, and you're not telling me anything new here. And it hasn't been working for me so far. And you haven't told me anything that's going to help it make it work in the future. So this is just, I don't know, until you can tell me something new, I'm really not going to engage. I'm just bored, waiting for something to happen. And I think if your goal in lessons is to share information, no one's waiting for that. So use an example for a journal. No one in your quorum is sitting there thinking, man, if only there was like a mechanism that I could mindfully process current events and think about my thoughts and ideas and problems. And man, if there's even a better way that I could document that in a way that would benefit my like kids and my kids' kids. Man, if only such a thing existed. Today, we're going to talk about journal writing. Oh, that's it, right? I mean, no one's doing that. No one's waiting to learn information that's going to tell them how to solve their problems. They already know the information. So if you're just sitting in this ideal space, a lot of people are just going to be bored. Now, the third person is actually the one that kind of scares me the most. And it's someone who's sitting there and listening to people talk about how they write in their journal and how awesome it is and how excited they are to have their kids and their kids' kids read it. And they're thinking, that's not me. I've never written in a journal before. I don't even know how to start. Like, I don't belong here, right? These people that are talking here, like, that's not me. I don't belong here. Like, I'm out of here, right? And that's what scares me because we need those people. They have life experiences. They're different. They're coming from a different perspective. And we don't want to alienate them by just simply talking about this ideal space, which is good. We probably ought to start there. But where, from this ideal, we have to somehow connect it over to the reality, right? And let me just pull up my phone real quick. There's a cool phrase from the handbook that I like, where it's talking about the purpose of Elders Quorum. And it says, members of the Elders Quorum work together to help accomplish God's work of salvation and exaltation. Really cool phrase. But that phrase involves people. And as soon as you insert people into anything, any idea, it becomes messy, nuanced, non-linear. You can't engineer it. It's complex. There's just no simple, clean way to talk about it. So that ideal state starts to become less helpful when we're talking about the boots on the ground work of salvation and exaltation of people. in all of their messiness. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so it's like somewhere what we recognize is that in these lessons, as we're planning how we're interacting in the quorum, we had to move from ideal, talking about why journal writing is awesome, to some real conversation that reflects where people are at,
Yeah.
and that requires vulnerability, right? It has, you have to talk about kind of the elephant in the room, and why aren't we writing in journals? What are the challenges of it? What's the realities of it?
Yeah. So let me make sure I'm following, because I think this is a really fascinating approach and model to kind of see things as they really are. It sounds like you're saying, in using journal writing as the example, but in a quorum setting, we typically talk about the ideals of whatever topic of it is, whether it's journaling or ministering or service or some gospel principle, right?
Yeah,
We present an ideal there, and there's a group in there. You talk about group one, that's like, that excites them, that motivates them, and things. Oh, I could definitely do more, and I love where they're going with that. And then the second group that is maybe more of like, well, maybe a little more indifferent, would you say? Or how would you describe that second group?
they're waiting for it to connect to reality for them, right?
Okay.
I mean, they're looking
Yeah,
for
yeah.
more of a, what does this look like in reality?
Yeah.
I've tried it and it hasn't worked, but no one else seems to be
Gotcha.
talking about that.
Yeah. And so they may be, obviously, group one is probably where we get those who are commenting a lot in a typical elders quorum setting. Group two, maybe they're like, step back thinking, well, I don't really get it. And,
Or they're just on their phones
you know,
because they're like, yeah, there's
yeah,
nothing new here for me. I'm just,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and then group three is those being like, man, enough with the ideals. Like, I just come here and I feel like these guys don't have the problems I've got, and nobody's really connecting with anything that's important to me. So I may not, skip a week here and there, or kind of just phase out, or I'm only here because my wife has the keys to the minivan, right? Like, I can't go anywhere.
yeah.
And so, but I really love this approach, and I agree completely. Like, there are these different dynamics happening, and often we're trying to just assume or push people into that group one. Like, no, 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 these ideals are important. You should like to journal, and if you don't like to journal, well, come on, get on board, and you should start liking to journal, right?
That's right. And the comment, which is certainly, well-meaning in that, you get out of church what you put into church. That's like a very person one or group one mindset of like, yeah, if you go in there and you like put in the mental work, thinking this through and kind of chewing on it in your own brain, you're going to get
Yeah.
something out of it. That's totally true. But we don't want to create a church experience that's only for those people,
Right.
and we
Right.
want to start to expand this out. And I think there's some very clear ways to expand the reach to get all three of those groups in. And let me give you an example of a lesson we had. This was maybe a year and a half ago. We wanted to talk about giving blessings. The quintessential lesson of here's how you give blessings, and the wording and stuff like that. So we actually started with sort of an ideal state. Had some guys share experiences with blessings that were really powerful for them. Okay. And then after talking about that, I kind of paused a second and said, guys, sometimes I don't want to give blessings. Sometimes when I go to like bless someone who's sick, I hope that they ask me to anoint instead of do the blessing. And I get really nervous about like blessing babies in church because it's in front of the entire church. Um, and in fact, one of my kids, I figured out a way to have them blessed at home. I can't remember the exact circumstances of why that was, but like part of that was just inside of me. I was afraid. I was really nervous about doing that in front of the whole congregation. I said, like, who else has experienced that? Who else has felt that? Like, I really don't want to give a blessing. And not surprising, a lot of people felt that way. Like, that's not an unusual thing. There are a few people who are just, oh, and maybe you're one of those. You're thinking like, man, you don't want to give a blessing. Like, why did they give you the priesthood? Uh, but I
Yeah.
think it's a relatively universal experience
Yeah.
of of feeling nervous about that. And so we kind of talked about that. Like, why is that, guys? Like, what about giving blessings is hard, despite the fact that we just talked about how awesome it is, how cool of experiences you can have. And that led into an awesome discussion about the things as men that would hold us back from offering to give a blessing. And
Yeah.
it was transformational for me, as we talked about, how Satan wants us to feel unworthy, how, worrying about the words we say, and whether it's going to sound spiritual or sound impactful. Like we like process that out loud. So it's like the chewing that the group one's doing inside their own head. We did it out loud as a group. We just kind of chewed on it for a while.
Yeah.
And I came out of it personally. The fear of giving blessings was largely gone. And since
Hmm.
then, I've had no issues. And so it was transformational for me to be in that group, to talk about the real challenge, being willing to kind of put yourself out there spiritually, to ad hoc give a blessing, by the inspiration of God. But, are you being inspired by God? Like there's all kinds of nuances there. But it gave me a lot of hope and encouragement. And I think everyone came out of that meeting just feeling really strengthened. So it started though with that kind of calling out the elephant in the room, right? Sometimes we don't want to give blessings. And that's, it's hard to say that because that can make you feel like something about you is broken. A priesthood
Hmm.
holder shouldn't not want to give blessings, right? That's a good priesthood holder would never feel that.
Hmm.
Well, but sometimes we do, but we're not
Yeah.
broken, but we do feel that. So let's
Yeah.
process that together. Let's understand that.
Yeah. It's a very human experience. And when you bring that up, somebody else will lean into that. Oh, good. He said what I was thinking. Right. And that stimulates that connection. So let me like back up more broadly and just make sure I'm following and give maybe the listeners a place to connect. So when you walk into elders quorum, I mean, or as you're preparing, or obviously not just you preparing every time, but maybe the instructor or others, hopefully they're doing so with this idea of keeping these three groups in mind, saying like, I can't just go in there and speak to the ideal and assume everybody's going to jump on board and love it and walk out like motivated, but you're considering these three groups, right? And then what does that actually, what's the application of that look like? Like, how do you actually, I mean, you've given some examples, but
Yeah.
this principle you talk about, that the in core meetings, connection precedes meaningful instruction.
Yeah. So let's talk about the connection part, because it all lines up together. So, um, the real discussions happen when people are vulnerable and talk about the real challenges they're facing. But how do we make it so they feel safe to do that? So there's a couple of things that we've done as a presidency to try and create the safety that allows someone to say, hey, I feel like I'm a little broken in this way. And that's not what they say. They say, I have an issue with swearing, or I have, um, you know, I struggle with this, that, or the other. But what they're, in effect, they're kind of saying is, hey, in this little way, I'm a little bit broken. And that's why it requires so much vulnerability to go there. But the reality is we're all broken in a little bit of way. Maybe it's sometimes the same, maybe it's different. So what have we done to try and create safety? The first thing is we did start to have a conversation at the beginning of quorum just about life. And that
Mhm.
was really, really hard when we started. It's probably because we jumped in, we knew what we wanted to do, but the people weren't prepared for it. We probably didn't start doing it the right way, but we just walked in and said, okay, guys, what's up? What's happening in life? Like, what's any, achievements at work? And we kind of changed up the question we'd ask, like, hey, did you have an accomplishment at work this week, or something with your family that was awesome? Or spring break just ended. Did someone go somewhere cool for spring break? And the first time I asked that question, it was dead silence. No one, I mean, because it was so foreign to what had been done for so many years in that quorum setting. So it was just quiet. It was hard.
Yeah.
But we kept doing it. We stuck with it. And I'll admit, for a long, it never got like super smooth, or just like where people are just kind of spouting all over the place. Some weeks would be, some weeks weren't. And I actually questioned for a time whether that was really meaningful. And then after we collected some data that said, yes, it was. I'll talk about that in a second. But that was the first thing. We spend time with the quorum talking about life and what's going on. The second thing is we had a conversation as a quorum that's where we specifically asked, what are the things about being guys, or this group general specifically, that would keep us from connecting? And then we came up with 3 ground rules to sort of address those, or 3 ground rules. And we talk about these not every lesson, but every other month. We'll just remind, okay, guys, our 3 ground rules are: number 1, we love each other. And that means that when someone expresses something and they're reaching out for someone, we will meet that, right? We're there. Like, we love each other. We're here for each other. Number 2, we trust each other. And that means that when I say something that's either controversial or vulnerable, no one's going to attack me. No one's going to talk about it outside of quorum. We'll validate you. We'll be there for you. You can trust us to be there for you if you go into that space. And the last one is we're honest with each other. Like, we say what we're actually thinking, as opposed to putting up a veneer. So we talk about those and try and make those kind of our guiding principles of our discussion.
Yeah.
And I think that it was helpful to talk about it out loud with everyone and be like, hey guys, our tendencies are to do things that will inhibit sharing. So let's specifically do these other things that will counteract those and encourage sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much here, and there's such a good, valid, practice of having these ground rules. And, nobody listening should necessarily copy and paste exactly what you said. And like, great, those are ours now. Right. But to really process what's needed in your, in your quorum. There's a book out there that I've referenced before. It's on our leadingsaints.org/books page, and it's called The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. And she talks about this concept of creating a container and of a meeting, whatever meeting it is. And obviously it works in the context of a quorum meeting where there's certain boundaries in that meeting, right? Where the experience begins and ends, and you also know the rules of what's happening in there. And sometimes we make too many assumptions as far as assuming it. Well, everybody knows, what's going on in elders quorum and how we should act. But to have these ground rules and even invite the quorum, say, are we missing anything here? Is there another ground rule we need to put in place? And in my elders quorum experience, even stating like, you guys, just so we know, and I literally go and close the doors of the, we're in the culture hall, and I'll say, everything we talk about, we invite you to let it remain in this room, right? And that naturally creates some safety that guys will lean in, they'll speak up more, and they'll get more real that way. And again, it's a ground rule. Just having ground rules and articulating them can really stimulate a positive quorum experience.
Yeah. So those are 2 things that we've done. The third one, we didn't start until probably a year afterwards. And it was a part of a discussion we were having about, we were studying a conference talk about prayer and the power of prayer and stuff like that. And I kind of got vulnerable to group and said, hey, I'm sitting here listening to this. I'm processing it. I do that as elders quorum, right? I'm one of those, growth processing people. I'm processing it, and I'm realizing I'm your elders quorum president, but I am not regularly praying for you guys by name. And they kind of ribbed me for a little bit, and they should have, right? That's something an elders quorum president should be doing, right? But it was a kind of admission, like, yeah, I'm not. And it morphed into a conversation in the group about, why don't we pray for each other? What would it look like if we did? Why don't we? How powerful would that group be if we prayed for each other? And so we decided at that quorum meeting to start asking, kind of collectively decided, let's ask each other, what can we pray for? And guys will be guys. I said something like, the first person that is willing to put themselves out there and ask for someone to pray for, I'll give them a candy bar. And 10 seconds later, I get a thing on our group chat, and it's like, pray that I get a candy bar from one of the guys in my quorum. I'm like,
that's great.
I knew someone was going to say that, but I mean, it's fun. We have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But then some people started to talk about hey, I could actually use a prayer about this. And what's cool about that, when you have a guy saying, "Would you pray for me?" That sort of implicitly, again, says, I'm broken in a small way, and I could use your guys' strength and support to help me deal with that and help me move past that and gain strength. And it's actually turned into a really, really sweet experience to have that conversation and just to say, hey, which of you guys here can we pray for today? And one experience that really stands out to me, we'd asked that question in a core meeting, and a couple of people had shared something, and then I could tell someone was in the back was like thinking about saying something. So I say, hey, what's up? And he was like, hey, my wife's in the hospital right now. None of us knew. Like,
Oh,
my
wow.
wife's in the hospital. We don't know what's going on. Like, it's kind of scary. Would you pray for her? And like in that moment, I was like, lesson aside, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
like set everything aside, like, dude, like let's talk about like how can we support you? Like what's going on? Like what can we do? And what I think about and when I'm most scared of as an Elder Quorum president is if we would go through an entire lesson, we're talking about journals and how awesome journals are, and someone's in the back corner the whole lesson thinking, my wife is in the hospital. Like I can't even think about the stuff they're talking about because there's something really challenging going on in my life, and none of these
Yeah.
guys know about it. They're just kind of doing their thing, talking about journal writing, and like my wife's in the hospital. Like so, creating that space for someone to share these are some challenging things that I'm going on, creates connection, creates unity, encourages vulnerability, and makes sure that we're not leaving someone else out in the cold as we're having our cute little discussion about something when they're really struggling with something big.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. I love that story. And again, it just like you said, if you almost feel the shift, in the core meeting when someone really leans in that way and that brotherhood really stimulates. So, talk to me about as far as like connection outside the Sunday quorum meeting every other week. How have you done that?
Sure. For a while, I wasn't sure if guys really wanted to meet up because we were doing no quorum activities. There hadn't been a quorum activity for probably 5 or 6 years when
Yeah.
I got called. This is even pre-COVID. Really didn't do anything. So we sent out a survey, and we actually sent it out again since then. I've got some results from that survey. 23 out of 25 people that filled out our kind of activity interest survey said we want to meet outside of quorum. And that kind of surprised me. I thought it'd be like 5 or 6 or 8. Almost 100% of members of my quorum that's filled out the survey said, yeah, I want to meet with guys outside of quorum. So that kind of makes a shift and say, okay, we want to meet. How do we want to do that? So we've organized what we do as a quorum in kind of 2 buckets. The first bucket is activities that are planned and sponsored by the Elders Quorum presidency. And we wanted to do those in ways that really strengthen the men in some certain key ways. So when we came in, we saw there are 4 relationships that we wanted to support our elders in. Number 1, the relationship with God. Number 2, the relationship with their wife. Number 3, the relationship with their kids. And number 4, the relationship with other men. And so we said, like, that's how we want to do this. And Sunday, generally, that's our help them strengthen the relationship with God. So what we did is as we planned activities, and we tried to do them every other month or so, we'd rotate between those 3 categories. So first, guys with other guys. So plan a shooting activity. Everyone shows up, someone brings guns, and we shoot for a while. Or hey, we want to help dads who have kids. Not all of the elders have kids. That's fine. Not every activity is going to apply to every person. But so we planned sledding activities. We planned a camping activity, an evening hangout play activity. And some of them were just like, yeah, leave the wives at home. Guys, this is just you and your kids. Come and have a cool experience. And then others were focused on guys and their spouse. So planned a date night with like painting and stuff. Have planned game nights, adult only game nights, focused on inviting people to come as couples and hang out together. So those activities, some have been wildly well attended. Some there's only been 4 or 5 people, and that's how we kind of post them to say, if this is a need for you, come. That's cool. Not everyone needs to come. You don't need to be here, but we want to create this opportunity. If this is a need that you have, jump on in.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the Quorum organized activities. We've also worked on starting interest-based microgroups. I'm sure that's the right word for it. But it's really just people who had shared interests and create a space for them and kind of help jumpstart that to happen. So one of the groups that started was a weekly soccer in the gym group. And from our perspective, what that involved was finding the people who are interested, connecting them together. We helped them find the equipment that they need to start meeting and playing soccer. And then it has taken off and it's happening all on its own, right? We don't supervise, we don't do anything. It just keeps happening. There's a discussion book group that happens. And based on a recent survey we did, there's a couple of others that we're going to kind of do that same thing. Start it, be an incubator to help it stay alive in the first couple of months when it's hard for those to get going, and then have them go off and run by themselves.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so those kind of 2 different groups, I think maximizes our impact and our time spent, but then creates opportunities for people to gather in a variety of different contexts and in support of different interests.
And so those are typically happening like on a weekly basis, like the one that you do with those focuses. Is that a weekly thing, or
it's what the group wants to do, right?
Oh, okay.
And there's been a few that have started and then kind of stopped, and we're going to try and kind of start them again, and that's natural. There's sort of an ebb and flow.
And I'm just curious, with all those activities outside the quorum, like you, obviously the interest-based ones, they kind of get a life of their own and they manage that and just keep it going, or come back to it. But do you feel like there's like, do you have to, one of your counselors that focus on making sure the activities are happening, or how do you, like with the administration and management of all that?
They're usually pretty simple. It's not a lot of energy and time. Guys typically aren't very needy. We don't have to create this elaborate experience for them. It's really just gather together. There's some donuts, some guns, or some sleds, or hot chocolate, or the one that we did that was a painting. We did bring in someone from the Relief Society to kind of help lead that, and some of the activities do end up coordinated or co-planned with Relief Society. We've had a great relationship with them to say, hey, we're doing activity to support men and their wives. That obviously, impacts you and your group. Let's work on this together. And that's worked out really well too.
Awesome. Anything else to mention as far as building connection outside of the Sunday core meeting?
Yeah, there is. One of the key elements to connection has been using WhatsApp as a informal communication mechanism from in between people within the quorum. And I'm going to talk a lot about WhatsApp. That's because of what we know. There's probably other platforms out there. We actually considered switching to Discord at one point, and there's probably others. But what the WhatsApp looks like, we try and get as many of the guys on there. They're not all on there, but most of them are. And, if I just pull it up, the last 2 weeks, hey, does anyone have a tile saw? I'm looking at doing some stuff in my kitchen. Hey, there's an activity this, game night this Friday. Hey, someone got taken to the hospital. Can you guys pray for them? Anyone have a battery charger? Anyone know how to, or a good place to get a garage door fixed? I could keep going on, right? It's just very informal connection, but it's an opportunity for someone to reach out and say, hey, guys, I have a need, and to have people in your quorum meet that need. Yeah. And we use that for, hey, someone in the hospital needs a blessing. Is there anyone available? This Saturday, we've got to move. We need 6 people who's available. Um, and the fact that it's not just one-way communication, it's not an email newsletter that goes out from the presidency to everyone and just kind of out and they just receive it. There's a lot of back and forth and people connecting with each other. So I think that's been a really powerful platform
Yeah.
to connect people in non-spiritual matters as well as spiritual things.
Yeah. Yeah. And in modern days, like with these so many apps and places to connect, it should almost be mandated that every quorum should have a group chat of some type, right? That because I see that a lot in our quorum chat as well. Just the very informal requests or thoughts, or someone shares a funny meme, or whatever it is, and it is such a simple way to stimulate further connection outside the quorum meeting, right?
Yeah.
So
And I will note WhatsApp has expanded the flexibility of the system. You can now have a kind of an umbrella community group, and then underneath it, a bunch of subgroups. And
yeah.
so we're actually in the process of transitioning that right now, where each of the focus or interest groups will have their own sub group or sub string within the
Uh-huh.
group. And so everyone can see what's happening, but they don't necessarily have to be part of the conversation or get all the notifications. So there's some issues in trying to make sure that people don't leave because there's just too much
Hmm.
unwanted chatter.
Yeah.
So something you kind of have to manage as a presidency. Um, but we're working on that, and that's been a great resource. But I
Yeah.
know
That's
that
awesome.
there's some groups that aren't doing that, so strongly encourage them to if they aren't.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. All right. What about the last principle here is minister to the ministers?
Yeah. So I mentioned at the beginning that we got the program administratively in position, and I won't say that it has been spectacularly successful at the ministering to the families level, and we've tried lots of different things, and um, more hand holding. I mean, everything I would tell you, you'd be like, yeah, Adam, I can tell you that wasn't going to work. um, but but what we kind of settled on at this point is to say, if we can't make ministering happen, because you can't really force it, what we can do is we can minister to the men through the ministering interviews. And the hope is that over time, by modeling what it looks like to look after someone, um, and to kind of show this, like, yeah, I'm not here to drive accountability. I'm here to drive relationship. And that's the purpose
Yeah.
of a ministering interview. And that's also the purpose of ministering. It's not administrative, it's not teaching. It's really ministering and looking at them. So I think the keys there are most of our ministering interviews happen over the phone, which I think some people prefer in person. We found doing over the phone is just fine.
Yeah.
Um, and 3/4 of the conversation is, hey, how are you doing? How's work? How's your family? How's life? What's going well? What are you struggling with? Um, and really spending time being with the the minister, the person.
Yeah.
And then there's a chunk of it that asks, how is ministering working for you? Like, what are the obstacles? Like, are you finding fulfillment in it? Are you not finding fulfillment? Like, how is it working for you? And then, is there anything we can support you to help you level up in a way that you want to with ministering? And so it's kind of a bit of ministering, a bit of administrative, and mostly just, hey, I'm here to minister to you. And
Yeah.
so I know, will that work? Has it worked? Yeah, not
Yeah.
not not amazing,
Well,
but
I think I don't know, we kind of like frame the ministering interview in maybe awkward ways, and we wonder, it almost becomes less fun when we do that, because it's sort of like, maybe too often we just quickly default to like, well, how's your family? It's like, are you ministering? Do you know your companion? Like, we get right into it,
yeah,
and that's just like, I don't know. Like, there's so much more that can happen there, where it's more of an interview of connection, and if you're stimulating this connection in core meeting, hopefully it gets easier. But
yeah,
by just making it a real conversation of how you doing, and like, oh yeah, and you know where to find your ministering assignment, right? Like, and I don't know, it'll be a lot more engaging, and it'll be less like, pulling teeth that way. But
Yeah, and they've been great conversations, and I've really
yeah,
enjoyed. There have been times when my counselors have done some of them, and I've done some of them. There's been some quarters where I said, "Hey guys, I'm doing all this quarter. I want to connect in with people and just kind of find out what's going on." And that
yeah,
both are good. I
yeah,
like as president to know what's going on and have those connections, um, but I haven't always done all of them myself.
yeah, really cool. Well, Adam, any point, principle, concept we didn't hit on that we might need to make sure we cover, or how do we do?
No, pretty good. Let me kind of round this out
Okay.
with an experience we had. This was a lesson back in December, and um, I was leading a discussion, or I was supposed to lead a discussion, and uh, couldn't narrow down on like a specific topic to talk about. And I realized, okay, I just want to hear from them. Like, how is this working for you guys? Like, what are you experiencing? And I wanted to do it in a way that allowed for maximum like honesty. So I actually tried something new. I
Uh-huh.
don't know if you're familiar with the Slido platform, where people can anonymously submit answers to a question.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So I threw up a QR code. Everyone logs on to the Slido app, and then started with a question just to kind of get things started. And the first question I asked them, that was kind of a real question, was, what have been impactful discussions for you in the past year in Elders Quorum? Like, what's really been meaningful to you? And this, I mentioned earlier how much of a struggle it's been for me to feel like that first 10-15 minutes of quorum was productive. Like the guys really enjoyed it. It wasn't just super awkward. What was fascinating is most of the answers I got to that question were, I love the time that we spend at the beginning of quorum talking. And
Hmm.
that blew me away. I did not
Yeah.
expect that. I expected, this great lesson or that great lesson. But, some of the comments were, the open discussions at the beginnings, very real, supportive, strengthening. The most impactful discussions are usually right at the beginning, where we address the needs of those in the quorum before a scheduled planned lesson. Praying for members of the quorum, speaking with one another concerning the welfare of our souls. And so that was really satisfying to see that. To think, all of those times where I asked it, no one said anything. When it was, silence, or just didn't seem, it was working. And that was
Yeah.
what's cool about it. Like, the guys want that connection. So even if they don't look like they want it, even if they don't act like they want it, they really do. And so even if done awkwardly, poorly, whatever, taking the time to do that. So if someone's hesitant to start that, or they did it once and no one said anything, like, keep up with it. Like, keep doing it. Um, it's really impactful and meaningful to people.
Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and then we went on and asked a couple of other questions. And the last question we asked was, what remains as my most significant obstacle to personal spiritual growth? So it's really a question that's asking
Wow.
for vulnerability, right?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And there was, we didn't get some answers that we suspect probably are true. Like, no one said, I'm struggling with pornography, despite the fact that someone probably is. So we didn't
Yeah.
get like 100% vulnerability, but some of the answers that people were giving were just really, they were personal. Dysfunctional tendencies to my own childhood trauma. Honestly, my phone, internet distractions, distractions that replace meaningful, mindful time with God. So it it was a cool experience. First of all, just to be able to ask questions and allow people to answer anonymously, which we don't do every time. I mean, obviously, most discussions are very much in person. They're very much, we know who's talking. But I think occasionally allowing people to be more vulnerable than they would be in person, I think is valuable. I think we got some great feedback, and in between each of these questions, we stopped and talked about it. And there was a lot of like, oh, wow, I didn't
Hmm.
realize people were feeling that or thought that. Um, and it kind of changed people's perspective as they saw what people were really thinking inside. So I think it's a cool tool. Again, I'm not I don't work for Slido. There's probably plenty of apps or versions of ways to
Yeah.
do that, but creating some system. We're actually in the process of kind of on a weekly basis having a Slido that's just out there that someone, if during quorum meeting they wanted to say something but they didn't feel comfortable saying it out loud, there's a format that they can kind of on the side discreetly throw something up there, and the teacher would be the only one that would see it
Hmm.
as a way to facilitate that. Because I think it's hard to have people be vulnerable in front of 15, 20 other guys at the same time.
Yeah.
So providing a format for them to be a little more vulnerable but not be so open, I think
Yeah.
is helpful.
I love it. Love it. I love a good tool like that people can check out as well. But and we've done that in our core meeting with a simple just anonymous Google form,
That's
right?
right.
And you just look at it in the spreadsheet in the results response portion, and it's amazing how real people will get when they know their name isn't attached to it. It still gives us a chance to discuss it and share perspectives on it. So it's really powerful. Cool, Adam. Well, this has been fantastic. So many fun ideas. I'm inspired, and lots that I can try and consider. As you consider your time as a leader, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
Yeah. Fantastic question. And, as I've seen my quorum grow over the past 3 years, I've definitely seen a lot of growth in myself. And that's been a hugely rewarding experience for me. What I see is when I am trying to do God's work in my elders quorum, and I see Him guide me, and not just me, my presidency. When we're counseling, we're gathering, and ideas come and they flow and they make sense, and then they work, and then we see growth. Like I know that God is guiding us, and as a disciple of Jesus Christ, best thing we can do is know what He wants us to do. And as we receive revelation and get guidance and then follow through with that and we can know in a given moment, I am doing exactly the right thing.